So 11:30. Okay, 5. Hello and welcome to Grad Ireland Career Discovery Week. My name is Rory Kavanagh. I'm the editor here with Grad Ireland. Thanks for joining us here this morning. Career path, focusing on the future. And I'm delighted to welcome our panel. We have Gillian Skinner, who's a graduate acquisition specialist with Jemison. We have Gary Long, who's a principal application engineer with Nikon, and Orla Bannon, who's the head of careers at Trinity College Dublin. Thanks to you all for taking the time to join us here today. Really do appreciate it. It's always great to get such a broad variety of insights on these panel discussions. Listen, we're here to talk about students and graduates' futures at a time that is very uncertain, and there's a lot of questions which they have. And I suppose, you know, at a time like this, it's always good to hear other people's stories as to how they, you know, got on their career path or how their careers evolved. So maybe might go through the three of you here and about a quick synopsis of how you kind of came to the role that you're currently in. Gillian, can we start with yourself?
Yeah, okay, so hi everyone, my name is Gillian. I'm the talent and marketing specialist for the Jemison International Graduate Programme. Lovely to see you all here today virtually. Thanks for taking the time out. So my career path, I studied commerce in UCD, and then I completed a master's in Trinity. And then after I took a break, I went to Australia where I worked and lived for a year. So then I returned and I entered into the FMCG world and worked in a marketing role in Robert Roberts. For the first 2 years, I worked solely on Robert Roberts, but then when it merged with Value Foods, I took on the extra responsibility of Lavazza. After 3 years here, I wanted to try a different industry and role. And I had seen iconic offices popping up around Dublin. So I don't know if any of you are familiar with iconic offices, but they're kind of like the WeWork of Dublin. So I really liked what they were doing, thought they were really exciting operational role here where I learned a completely different and new skill set. After 2 years there, my present job came up in Irish Distillers. Irish Distillers is kind of always a company that I wanted to work for. I had a lot of friends that came up through the graduate programme and always kind of felt like I was nearly an extension of the programme. So yeah, it's a brand I've always wanted or I've always loved and a programme I've always admired. So it was kind of a no-brainer. So
okay.
That's me.
And Gary, you're a program application engineer with Nikon. Tell us a bit about what that involves and how you came to this current position.
Yeah, so I started out with being surrounded growing up by a lot of engineers in my family and kind of felt I wanted to go that way. I spent a lot of time working on cars and stuff and was really interested in that, but I found I was more interested in the technology behind it. So I went into electronics at IT Carlow. And I graduated with a degree in integrated circuit design. So that's basically designing the lines on a microchip that would become a microchip. And I studied that and finished after 5 years and said I'd never, ever do anything to do with integrated circuitry ever again. And 10 years later, I'm working in the semiconductor industry. So things kind of went in a bit of a loop there. Engineering is something that really excited me. So when I graduated, I went to the Netherlands. I worked for a couple of years for a large semiconductor company over there, where I got kind of a hands-on experience for how for all the systems and how complex they are and how they work with each other. And from there, then I kind of focused on I want to get into the applications background. So that's more focusing on the theoretical background and improving things to make the microchips smaller and faster. So with that in mind, I kind of came into Nikon and built a career path there from field service up to applications.
I see. Thanks very much, Gary. Orla.
Well, I've got what you call a portfolio career. I actually graduated in biochemistry from Trinity, so my background is in science. And I graduated in the mid-90s, which was a challenging time, very similar to now. So I went to work with a small SME in the area of medical and scientific publishing, dawn of the internet, online journals, all of that. So I got into a very small SME and I grew it there over 7 years with the boss. I was employee number 5 and we grew it to over 250 in 7 years. And then I took on a worldwide role and traveled worldwide working for the organization. I then decided to go into the public sector and I went to work in the HSE in a very well-known organization these days called the Health Protection Surveillance Centre. So I was involved in setting that up. I was the senior manager there for over 11 years. And then I fancy coming back to my education roots, and I came back to Trinity in 2013, and I managed the medical school there for about 4 or 5 years. And then my current role in the career space came up as director of the career service in Trinity. And I've always been very interested in supporting all the younger staff that we had and kind of working with them. I studied all the way along part-time. I did my MBA, I did my HR degree, I did an accountancy qualification. So I kept that kind of mentoring and coaching element to my work. And so when this role came up, I said, that's exactly what I want to do. So I've been in this role now for about 2.5 years.
Very good. And just staying with yourself, Orla, I mean, I think through Gillian's story and Gary's story, and of course your own story, there's been, each job has fed in something that's obviously informed the next career step. And I suppose along the way, obviously there's skills that accumulated that we all use in our jobs. But when you're talking to, or when your staff in the Career Development Centre in Trinity are talking to students, talking to graduates, what are some of the transferable skills that are kind of standing out for you in terms of the trend that is applicable to areas that would have most graduate jobs? What would be some of the skills that you find are most in demand?
I think if you look at the current climate, the key skill that's going to be needed is adaptability, and to be able to show that you can be adaptable. So we very much work with students to kind of say, particularly to use this time to say, show where you've used the skills and experiences you have in different ways, show how you can apply what you know to different situations. So it's very much that adaptability piece, I think, is going to be very, very key. And then kind of linked to that is the whole digital agility. So it's not being a real ability that we've all had to use using software like this, being able to adapt quickly to using new technologies, being interested in learning about them. So I think the term digital agility is very important. But the one thing that keeps coming up over and over again, and maybe Gillian and Gary will agree with me, is this whole area of curiosity is really what a lot of employers are looking for. That, you know, that graduates coming out question things, that you just don't say, actually, this is just what you do, and you just go and do it, that you have that kind of curiosity and you have the communication skills to communicate that curiosity. And that's something that we're working a lot with, is on communication skills and storytelling and being able to debate different viewpoints. We're working a lot with bringing the students into multidisciplinary groups in Trinity so they can get used to hearing different perspectives and discussing different perspectives. So I think it's a combination of that, but I definitely think adaptability, flexibility, agility are going to be very core skills that are going to be looked for over the next couple of years.
And Gillian, what Orla said there about, she touched on the phrase curiosity, and I suppose, you know, when listening to your own story, you know, and that you obviously had a passion for the brand of Jameson, and obviously there was an inherent curiosity about that brand. And I suppose it's interesting that, is that now something that you're kind of looking for when you're talking to applicants to the graduate program as well? Are you looking for that curiosity, that passion? How important is that?
Yeah, definitely. I think like the type of candidate that we're looking for is someone that we say has serious character. So that means someone that's creative, innovative, and a real self-starter. So kind of like Orla touched on it there, you know, you don't want people conforming to groupthink. You want people to challenge the status quo, and our brand ambassadors like definitely do that. But just also to echo Orla's point as well, I definitely think adaptability is a key skill at the moment. Like you can see industries like completely changing overnight. And for Irish distillers, for example, traditionally the role of a brand ambassador is predominantly field-based. And with COVID, that completely changed. And our brand ambassadors had to look at moving their activities from an offline context to an online one, and almost immediately. So I think by being agile and then adapting to the situation so quickly, they were able to do this. Another transferable skill, I think, is a good work ethic. So attitude is everything, and demonstrating a positive approach to work and being honest is also another key skill, I would say.
Okay, Gary, and both Orla and Gillian have used the phrase, you know, to be agile in terms of how you do your work and how you approach your work. In the world of engineering, obviously, there's a process in place, And as Orla said, it's always good to question and try and improve and try and hone ways of doing things. How are soft skills in the engineering world? What sort of soft skills would you find kind of complement the obviously necessary hard skills?
They're hugely important, and I'd agree 100% with what's been said previously. The curiosity is what I'd call logic in my area. But we want people that come in here to be able to use logic, because as you mentioned there, in engineering, everything has processes and procedures, and there's BKMs, best known methods, that people are supposed to follow. But when you get down to the nitty gritty and the more complex tasks that people have not explored, that curiosity is what sets you out apart from the others. It basically lets you, question the limits and explore the data more to figure out what's really going on behind it. Being able to come in and just follow procedures is one thing, but if you want to excel in a career and build a career for yourself, you have to have that curiosity and the drive. That's very important. And then another one that I would have is teamwork, definitely, because without people to bounce your questions off or people to question, you won't improve in an echo chamber, I guess is the way I'd put it. And then communications is part of the adaptability that we need at the moment. With this remote working, communications is key. People need to remember to pick up the phone and call a colleague as if you were in the office speaking to them. Texting or sending a WhatsApp isn't really efficient all the time. A follow-up call just to keep everybody as if you're in the office together, especially for younger people who join a company. It's very important for their peers to be around them and to help them grow and learn the soft skills that you don't get from reading a book or just joining a company. And
I suppose, Gary, like in terms of collaboration, which is obviously key in the projects that you would be working on there in Nikon, how challenging has it been to effectively collaborate with your colleagues and graduate recruits to the business during this period of remote working?
It has been a challenge. Getting everyone adjusted to a remote type of working has been tough, especially as our company has a pretty senior age profile, because people stay a long time at the company. It's a great thing, but just getting those people to change to a way of working they're not used to. Now, everybody stepped up and we're now flowing as normal. We never took the foot off the accelerator. Our industry hasn't slowed down over the last few months, but that initial change was difficult and we got over it. But I like it myself personally, but it does require a lot of self-motivation. You have to be able to get up in the morning and get moving, set a routine for yourself. Don't fall into habits like, lying in bed too long or stuff like that. You get up, have a coffee, go for a walk with the dogs, get into your office at the normal time you get to work at, and just hit the ground running. And remember to keep communicating with your colleagues as if you're still there, because we're all still talking. So
yeah. And Gillian, I mean, that's an interesting point, because you're obviously working with people who are, this may be their first job on the Jameson graduate program. How hard, or to what degree have there been challenges in terms of maintaining motivation, maintaining engagement, that you're able to inculcate the culture of the business with them at what is a very early stage in some of these people's careers?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Rory. I think it kind of goes back to the type of person that we look for. So we look for someone that's a self-starter. So they're all generally like very motivated. I think during this time, we've actually, like, as the brand ambassadors as a global family, have felt more connected than ever. We've kind of leveraged technology and we've set up like different WhatsApp groups, and we're constantly in communication with them. So they've actually remarked that they feel more connected to the business now than ever. So yeah, it's worked really well for us.
And Orla, I mean, you were obviously working in Trinity in mid-March when this all came to a head, and we realised that the world was going to change for the foreseeable future. You would have been dealing, you and your great staff there in Trinity would have been dealing with students in terms of finalising plans for that internship or for this graduate position, or making sure that they had a path in place. A lot of that would have been thrown into some element of disarray, particularly on the student side. There's a lot of uncertainties that you guys wouldn't have control over, obviously. But how have you worked to kind of engage with students and reassure them and help them up with plans, alternative plans in this very challenging time?
Well, we were lucky in a way, Rory, that in Trinity we had a lot of the technology was already there. So we were able to kind of, I hate to use the dreaded pivot word, but we were able to move quite quickly to online. And in the career service, we already had been starting to use Teams a little bit and looking at virtual appointments. So we were able to move from the student perspective. The career service just moved online very, very quickly. And then I suppose we broke at a time where students were preparing for exams and that. So we kind of didn't want to overwhelm students too much. So we kind of said, look, we're here if you need us. But since they finished exams, we've really been talking to them, reaching out to them. We've a lot of student focus groups to hear what they're saying. Obviously, we've been linking with the likes of all our major employers to find out what's happening and really keeping the communications going with students. And then we've been giving them just some ideas about what they could use this time for. I think the area that's been most badly affected has been the summer internship programs. Now, some organizations, maybe the more technology where we're able to move to virtual internships, but a lot of companies it just wasn't possible for the summer ones within the time frame. So we were trying to give students ideas about what else they could be using this time for, and for exploring jobs and opportunities, researching companies. If a student drops them an email, say, I'd be interested in having a chat to you about what it's like to work in your company, they're getting a lot more positive feedback, or maybe people wouldn't have had the time before. So we're asking them to look at that and keep their motivation. Gillian referred to it there, and it's to keep their motivation going over the summer, to reach out, upskill, talk to people, volunteer, and to keep active and to keep reaching out to your career service. I mean, I'm speaking on behalf of Trinity, but I know encourage students to reach out. Your career service are all still working and are there to help and support you.
And would you expect, Orla, just your own opinion, obviously, in terms of postgraduate study, do you think that's going to come back more into the frame for students now in light of the uncertainty regarding the jobs market?
We definitely know there's a lot more interest in postgraduate study and a lot more inquiries about it. You're probably aware that we have a new set of programs in postgraduate programs in Trinity linked to our whole E3 project, was all engineering, the environment, emerging technologies, which are very topical programs, and we've seen a lot of interest in those. So we're really asking students to take the summer to do is really to reflect on themselves, take time out to reflect. All the career services of online tools where you can kind of go through, kind of look at your personality type, think about your values, really what do you want to do? Do you feel you need to go further to get into the industry you're in? And in some cases you do. But in some cases, there's still a lot of opportunities out there. So, and that's the message I want to get out, is that, there are a lot of opportunities out there, and for students really to broaden their horizons a little bit more and to maybe think a bit broader. But I think it'll be interesting to see how the postgraduate pans out, but I think there may be a lot more interest in it this year than in previous years.
Okay, and Gillian, as Orla's been talking there about, using this time to reflect and, think about the values of your chosen career path, or what's important to you, and how do you find an employer that would match that. What would you say to someone who is maybe looking to move into business, say marketing, or maybe a job at Jameson, in terms of how do you identify a company that matches your values? How do you identify a company that reflects where you want to go in your career? And it's very hard to do that remotely. So, any tips you might have?
Yeah, I think what Orla touched on there, now is a great time to reflect, and it's a great opportunity. I know, for a lot of people, they would have thought, life was so hectic pre-COVID. So now we have that time and space. So I would definitely recommend, look at the direction you're going in and reevaluate it if that's the right path for you. I think a good way to kind of identify the values of a company are look at their website, go through LinkedIn, see different employees, maybe reach out to them, ask them about the company culture. I suppose it's all about leveraging what's online, and there's so many ways you can reach out to people, look at your network, see if you know a friend of a friend that works in that company. I know for us personally, our values about being real, remarkable, and responsible. So that's the kind of traits that we would look for in our candidates. And
Gary, for people who are looking to transition into the engineering space, and they may have had an internship lined up for the summer. And as Orla alluded there, a lot of internships would have been cancelled. A lot of firms in the engineering space would be maybe smaller SMEs as well. What can students do? They may say, oh, is there any point in, going online and watching videos about a particular discipline, or maybe doing some sort of an online course? What's the value in, just building up your skill set, even though it may seem like a small incremental steps? What sort of value can they add to your application if you're trying to get into something like engineering?
There's so much value in that. If you spend the time researching and upskilling, whether it be on YouTube or LinkedIn or anything like that, any new skills that you acquire that you can sell in an interview to any company that's looking to hire you, that will stand to you far more than your degree you're coming in with. That's what people want to see when you've got someone sitting in front of you. We want to see a guy come in with, if they have a degree, that's why they're in front of you, or if they match your skill set you're looking for. It's the extra on top of that you want to hear. You want to hear that, oh, my internship fell through this summer, but instead I went on LinkedIn Learning and signed up for a course in management. Even though the job doesn't require management, I thought it would help me in improving my communication.
It shows initiative, yeah.
It shows initiative. It builds up on what you've got already and shows you want to go the extra mile. It shows that curiosity, to come back to what Orla was talking about earlier. And it just shows that you've got that little bit extra. The reflection part is absolutely what it's all about as well. This summer is a great chance for a lot of young people to reflect and think about what they want to do. Is the career path that they chose a couple of years ago the one they want to stick with? And how can they diversify that career based on what they've learned from the COVID-19 pandemic? Like what careers are out there and what careers are robust?
Okay. And when you think about the actual career path as such, I've always been curious about this, and maybe Orla would be the natural place to start. I think when people think of the career path, they can feel like they need to have it mapped out, 15, 20 years in the future. There's always events which will happen. There's this job you take, maybe a summer job in a totally different area that will think, actually, I like this, or there's something I'm doing here that I really would like to explore further. Obviously planning is important, but it's also, and you've used the word yourself, important to reflect and make sure you're really making a choice here that suits you. So how far in advance, and I know there's no one size fits all answer, but how far in advance can you really realistically plan, especially at a time like this? And what would your advice be for people listening in here who would be uncertain?
I think the thing is that it's just very important to take that first step. And that's the hardest step to take. Once you take that first step, you learn, and you then can kind of different opportunities. I wanted to do, but there's no harm in just taking that first step, doing some learning on the job. It opens your eyes up to what other opportunities are there. There's a lot of careers that I didn't know about when I graduated. I didn't know I'd end up being the director of a career service. I didn't even know that job existed. So I think you just have to take it in small steps. And then I think when you're actually working, then you need to say, well, I'd like to actually go in that direction. So what's it going to take? What do I need to do to get there? Do I need to go into further study and study part-time? Do I need to take a year out and maybe go and focus on doing an MBA if you want to go into a certain area? If there's maybe a certain sector might open to you through a role that you have, you kind of go, actually, that's a sector I never considered before, and doing your research into that. So, I think to kind of maybe use shorter horizons at the beginning of your career, and then at each step back to the reflection saying, okay, I want to go this way, what do I need to get there? And then start planning that way. And then I think as you kind of get more into an area that you're interested in, then you can start thinking longer and longer term,
And Gillian, like that kind of step-by-step approach that Orla outlined there, is that something that you would experience in your own career development so far? Was there any sort of a point where there was a fork in the road and you kind of chose this way over this way, and why?
Yeah, I think for students just coming out of college with little to no work experience, it can be very hard to know what direction that you want to go in. So I definitely, when I came out, I knew I wanted to try marketing first of all, and I knew that the FMCG was a very fast-paced environment, which is something that I thought I would thrive in. So I tried my hand at that. But I think, to go back to Orla's point, it's really important to give yourself the time and space to reflect. So a lot of us can get on this hamster wheel and just keep going and going. But you really have to take a step back and kind of ask yourself, is this the direction, that I want to go in? And take each experience as it comes and be flexible with your plan. Don't get me wrong, I think it's amazing to have a plan, but I do think that you should have that flexibility as well. Otherwise, you can get just too tunnel visioned and you mightn't see different opportunities outside of that.
And Gary, just on that as well, that you mentioned in your own career synopsis that you swore you never work, with semiconductors again, which I think I have that right. But yeah, that's what you're doing now in many ways. So again, was there a kind of a pivot point for you? I can use that word pivot, sorry, where you kind of said, yeah, this is what I want to do. This is going to bring me in the direction of rewarding projects, which will enable me to progress my career. Or was it
Yes, so one of the things I'd get if I critique myself is that I stick to a plan a lot and I make things very planned, which is probably a negative in a way. And I would echo what Orla and Jill have both said, that if I was to reflect on my career path so far, taking that time at the start would have been something I would have done differently. Luckily, it's worked out for me. I'm very happy in what I do and I enjoy what I do, but I would have done it differently. I would definitely have taken that time to reflect. It's definitely something that I encourage all graduates to do, is reflect on what you want to do if you need to take that time. And then most importantly, if you need to change direction. Don't be afraid of it. Because I didn't want to do integrated circuit design and I've changed direction and ended up in it. But
it sounds terrifying.
But it's a great positive to be able to critique yourself and improve on things as you go through life. My career path got me to where I am. I'm happy with what I do. I'm interested in it. But when I left college, I didn't even know this role existed. It's similar to what they've said already.
We had a question here, what do you wish you knew when you were a final year student or a graduate? And I suppose you've kind of answered that, and that you wish someone had told you to take the time to take stock and kind of question where you really want to go. Would that be fair enough?
Absolutely. I would have liked to go back and done all the traveling. Luckily, in the career that I'm in and the path that I went, I got all the traveling as part of the job in other places and get paid to be there, which was great. But if I did things differently, I would have took the flexibility and time to travel on my own maybe and work in some different areas to see if maybe there was something that piqued my interest. For example, doing this recruitment stuff on behalf of Nikon, it's not my role or my job, but I enjoy it. I enjoy talking to young people and helping them, kind of think about what they want to do and where they want to go. It's something that is interesting to me.
And Gillian, if you could talk to yourself back when you were finishing college or just, putting together your CV for the first time for a real serious proper job application in terms of a long-term career path, what would you say to yourself in terms of what you may do differently or what you may factor into your thinking?
Yeah, I think one thing I would say to myself is, don't stress too much about, your CV or your application forms. Obviously it is so important, but don't let it take away from your college experience. I think I was, there's almost a pressure when you hear of people applying to this program and that program, and you get so caught up in it and you nearly don't enjoy the college experience because you're so far in the future. So I would definitely say try and be present and enjoy the present moment for as much as you can. And then I suppose, for me as well, I suppose it goes to that point of taking time to reflect. It was only in when I was 29, I took 3 months out of work when I was in Iconic. And I went away and I did a yoga teacher training course. I volunteered. And I just got such clarity then on what I wanted to do going forward. And I came home and then applied for the job of that I'm in presently. And now I'm 100% on my right career path. So it's all worked out.
And Orla, I know you're obviously working with students and they have their questions. Am I going on the right path? And you're working with graduates 2 and 3 years out and maybe questioning very soon in their career if they've made the right choice. What do you say to someone that who's started their career and maybe they're 2 years in somewhere and they go, I don't think this is for me, and I put all my learning in this direction. What would you say to them?
Well, I think it comes back to, even if you've taken that and gone into something that you're not quite enjoying or feel it's not for you, you have to think about, what have I actually learned from this experience? And you've learned something that you didn't know. You've learned what you don't want to do, which is just as important as learning what you do want to do. And I think the thing is, you don't look at your career in a vacuum. You're changing as a person. The environment around you is changing all the time. And at certain points of your life, you're going to look for different things from your career. So you need to bear that in mind as well. And comes back to what Gillian was saying there about having the flexibility. But I think the thing is, every experience you learn from, and you're adding something extra. So I think if you learned what you don't want to do, then maybe you start to look at things that maybe you didn't consider before, and maybe opening your horizons a little bit as well. And I think that's very important, to keep your eyes open, keep your networks open. And a lot of the time, for me, a lot of my career changes came from having conversations with people and learning about other areas, going, oh, I actually didn't know anything about that. I think I'd like to go into that space and explore it a bit more. So again, as Gillian said, I would think to kind of stay positive, take the learning from it, chalk some stuff. Sometimes you just have to say, well, that was a learning experience. I learned X, Y, and Z, and now these are the things I want to develop further in my next role. And that actually helps give you clarity on your journey, I think.
And Orla, I'll stay with you. I suppose if in a few months' time, hopefully in a few months' time, when things have calmed down a bit, and if a student is, sitting in the career development centre and they're having a chat with one of your staff, and there's always the question, what did you do during the lockdown, or what did you do during the pandemic? How did you, or and they may be asking, oh, I should have used my time better, or you may have somebody said, I actually found it really beneficial because I had time to do this. What are some of the very practical things that students can do now, looking into the summer, to boost their skill set? And I know we've touched on this before with transferable skills, but just a few kind of practical tips as I kind of wrap it up.
Sure. I think the first thing is to use your time to prepare. We referred to it earlier, but I think it really it's a unique time where you have the space. So as we said, expand your connections, go online, use LinkedIn, pick up the phone, talk to people. I think Gary made a very good point there, that it is very important that if you can get contact details for someone, pick them up, talk to them. You'll find out a lot more about what it's like to work in an organization by having a 10-minute conversation with somebody than you will over 50 emails, So prepare for that. Go to your career service, look at any of the online tools they have there that you can do kind of different types of psychometric tests. It's just interesting to take the time to learn a bit about yourself. As I said, explore jobs and opportunities. Maybe you didn't consider research on companies that you can say, actually, what do they do? I hear about them all the time, but I don't actually know what they do. A lot with is, as I said, to know how to apply the skills and experience you have to different scenarios. So again, I showed I'm adaptable by I did this. I showed that I'm curious because I did this. And it could just be it doesn't have to be something to do with work. It could be something in your personal life. Maybe a lot of students have had to show a lot of resilience in their personal lives. So maybe it's kind of showing the skills, the personal skills and soft skills they've learned through that. And as I said, about really upskilling where you can. I think we've all said that on several occasions. And it's really about showing your motivation for whatever you decide to do, to show that you're keeping motivated, so that if you go into an interview in October, November, you can say, look, this is what I did. And even if you feel you haven't done an awful lot, I think if you go through a reflective exercise, you'll actually have learned maybe a lot about yourself. Yeah.
We have a few questions here, and I'm just going to try and touch on them if you don't mind for the next 10 minutes or so. And just, you mentioned LinkedIn there, and I know, Gillian, you've mentioned it too. There's a thing called LinkedIn etiquette, I suppose, these days. And the question here from someone who said, if you're applying for a job, if you're going for an interview, is it too soon to be trying to connect with someone via LinkedIn? Should you just keep it to researching the role itself? What would your own view on that be, Orla? And I'll move on to Gillian and Gary.
I think it depends on the role you're applying for, and kind of what, in a lot of organizations, they will say, feel free to contact people in our organization beforehand. And I know in some organizations, if you haven't kind of reached out to someone, it would be because you will be asked in the interview, well, what prep did you do for this interview? What did you find out about our organization? So I think, I think kind of, I wouldn't be reaching out to the CEO, but find maybe somebody who's working in a team in a similar way that you might be working in. And it's just keep it very informal and very casual. but I would maybe check in advance just to say, look, I'd like to reach out, just want to check that that's okay. And there's no harm in asking. So but I would be encouraging students to do.
Gillian, what's your own take on that?
Yeah, I think, like for me, like a few students have reached out to me before, and I think it shows great initiative. They want to know more about the program. So I think that's great. Like it's such a useful tool, LinkedIn. Like even if you're going for an interview and you see who's interviewing you, like you can look at their career path and maybe reference it as well. It shows, that you've done your homework and that you're really interested. So that would be my advice to students.
So Gary, if you were meeting someone next week for to do a first job interview, and they're trying to connect with you beforehand, is that kind of a well done, you've shown initiative, or let's just take a step back for a minute here till we actually chat first? What's your own take on it?
I definitely wouldn't knock it. My opinion on it is it's a good thing. I've had quite a few engineers, not even just for Nikon within Europe, but for our sister company in the US, have contacted me about my role and what I do and ask for information. They're gathering research, and I have no problem replying to those people. Our recruiter probably will kill me for saying this, but yeah, it's a good thing. It's a positive step. Just don't let your confidence be knocked if someone doesn't reply. It's easy for me being able to reply as an engineer because I probably only get 5 or 6 a month from people, but our recruitment people are getting thousands a day, so it's difficult for them to get through. So it's important you choose who you try to communicate with. Pick that role you're interested in and reach out to them rather than going straight for the CEO or the head of recruitment.
Okay. Orla, I'm going to have to just throw some questions your way here if you don't mind, because I just think they would be quite particular. Yeah. We have a question here from someone who wants to change careers. They spent the last year doing a full-time course which is unrelated to their existing career, as in the career path they were on. But now, due to circumstances, they may need to return to their existing career path. How do you explain that last year where you seem to be moving in one direction on a CV or in a job interview? How would you maybe deal with that one? Tricky.
Well, I think it is, and I think the thing is just to look at yourself and see what your motivation was for going to do the course in the first place, and then to look at your motivation for having to go back, and then try to put a narrative around that. That's honest. I think the thing is, and we say this to a lot of students, and this is you hear this all the time. Don't leave unexplained gaps. Don't leave things unexplained. But be prepared to answer a question on it as to you did this and now you want to come back here. Why do you want to do that? And really have kind of an answer prepared for that says, look, I went off, I did this, I explored this direction. But on reflection, I actually feel I still have a lot to give in the role I was in previously. But look at all the new skills I've developed, and show how you can apply the new skills you've developed. On it. Don't try to hide anything.
Don't try to hide anything, yeah. And so, sorry, I'm going to have to just stay with you here for one more because it's related to postgrad. Someone's asking here if there's a job that they want to apply for and they're looking for postgrad experience, but they don't have the postgrad experience, but they do have working experience. Would you advise them to apply for the job or not, or would they just be wasting their own time?
The key thing to do is look at the job description. Look at the job description and see what they're looking for in terms of skills and experience. So the job spec might be saying we're looking for it that you have it in a postgraduate context, but maybe you have developed that skill, some of the skills they're looking for and the transferable skills they're looking for in a different context. So if you feel you have met the skills that they're looking for, but maybe acquired them in a different way, frame them in a way, articulate them in a way that the recruiter, the organization will understand. And I mean, there's no harm in applying. And I think every time you go get a job description, customize and tailor your CV, it's a good learning experience. So I would encourage you that if you feel you can meet the skills, there's no point in applying for a job if you look at this 5 skills and you say, I don't meet any of those. But if you have, but you've gained them in a slightly different context, then just put the narrative around it. and apply.
And don't be afraid to try, at least.
Don't be, as I said, every time you go through and kind of like, obviously most people will know you really should be looking at the job spec and looking at the wording in your CV and really tailoring it for each job you're applying for. That's a learning experience every time. So if you don't get that job, that's fine. But, maybe a couple of months down the line, something else will come up and you already have the work done for it. So that's worthwhile doing.
And Gary, there's a phrase in sport, I suppose, you either win or you learn. And there's a question here we have about someone like dealing with setbacks in their career, that they've been, obviously they're working and they've got a lot of experience, but, they haven't been able to make that next step forward. And how do you kind of harness that, if you get rejected for a promotion or if you want to go for a new job, but it didn't work out for you, what's your own steps on kind of harness some sort of a benefit from a setback?
So it comes directly back to what Orla was saying there. You always, everything you take is a learning experience. So for me, in my career path to date, one of the key things I always use in any promotion I go for or any change I make is I always, every year I sit down with my manager or supervisor, whoever it would be, and I'd always spend most of the time talking about, please give me my critical review. I don't want to hear the good things. I want to hear all the bad things, and I want to know what I need to do to improve. So for one of my key ones over the years was my communications. It was coming up over and over again. So I went and I started studying communication skills and how I could improve and public speaking and stuff like this. I spend my days presenting to customers all over the world from different cultures, and having to be able to adapt to that and do it efficiently while talking about something technical was quite difficult. But I got there in the end through learning, and eventually I built enough confidence in myself through that learning to be able to do it. It's a setback, but don't let your confidence drop. Like, keep confident in yourself and say, look, I can do this. I can go. I can figure out where I went wrong, and I can get this done. So there's so many tools out there at your disposal, from books, reading's great, but online, YouTube, LinkedIn, anything you want, you can find on the internet.
The tools are there, yeah. And Gillian, we have another question here from someone who had an internship position that's been cancelled due to the current situation. I know we talked about some of this earlier, but would you have any particular, practical advice what the student can maybe do over the summer now to either try and find another one or to maybe build their skills? Just some practical advice that may be able to help them out.
Yeah, of course. I can imagine that must be so disappointing. I suppose my best advice would be, like, how can you use this time now to increase your chances of getting a job or an internship in the future? So as Gary said, there's lots of tools out there. There's loads of online tools that can be easily accessed to upskill. One that I'm thinking of is called Udemy. So there's thousands of online courses available there, and they're not too expensive either. And also, another good thing to do at this time is to review your digital footprint and make sure that it reflects the image that you're trying to convey to potential employers. So look at your LinkedIn, look at like your Facebook, Instagram. Is it on private? What's coming up? What's coming up when you Google your name? Your personal brand is more important than ever, especially your digital one. So I would definitely take the time to look over that.
Okay. And Orla, you'll just be happy to know that we've received a message from the student who you gave advice to there about, applying for the job if they didn't have the postgrad. So they said it's very helpful that they were in this situation last week and they actually took the chance and they applied for the job. So let's hope it works out for them.
Yeah, that's great. Best of luck.
And Orla, would you have any, just closing thoughts here, would you have any words of reassurance for students and graduates now as they look into a very uncertain world? You hear the doom and gloom forecasts, every day. But yet, business is still going to have to be done. People are still going to need talent. People are still going to need the ambition and the kind of critical thinking that is present in so many graduates today. So what words of reassurance would you have for students and graduates of business?
I think the thing is, the jobs market will be affected, but I think the graduate jobs market is going to be less affected because there's always going to be jobs there for graduates. What you will find is that certain sectors will be affected more than others. And I think that's something, that we need to factor in. But there's some sectors are going to see some of the opportunities that have come from this. And already we've seen jobs growth and increased recruitment in some sectors. So I think, I think that I think don't look on the negative side. There are still jobs. If you go on to like our jobs board or any of the job sites, there are still jobs out there. Recruitment is still going to be going on. I know a lot of the companies who recruited for their graduate development programs starting in September are all going ahead, apart from one or two. So it's still a positive environment. So and what we're doing a lot is working with say maybe some of our graduates who graduated during the recession. And I know a lot of the universities are doing that and kind of making them available to kind of mentor and speak to students. So, because it's always good to hear from someone who's maybe been through the experience between 2008 and 2012 and kind of what they did and the steps they took. So I know a lot of us are working with our alumni to really help support the current students kind of coming out. And I suppose one of the things that's very important, and I know where you guys do this as well, is to really keep on top of the labour market information that's coming out, and for students to kind of keep reading about that, to look at the Grad Ireland information, your career service information, to see what's happening out there in the jobs market and to see how the different sectors are reacting to what's happening at the moment.
Thanks, Orla. Gillian, any words of assurance for students and graduates who are seeking to start their career?
Yeah, no, I think that's some great advice there, Orla. I think to build on it, I think it's all about perception at the moment. Like, how do you perceive the current climate? Like, are you looking at it in like doom and gloom, or as an opportunity to self-reflect and to also upskill? So I would say try and stay as positive as possible, and also like now's the time to get creative. Things are changing at such a rapid rate. I think now's the time to adapt and get creative.
Okay, and Gary, just to close off, what would you say to graduates who are maybe looking to take the next step in their career, or to even start their career and they're feeling very uncertain? What words do you have for them?
Yeah, I just echo what's been said over the last 45 minutes. Is positivity. Everyone stay positive. That's the first thing you need to make sure you do. Don't become complacent. For instance, most of us that are talking here on this channel have had to change and adapt over the years as our skills that we learned in college became redundant. The world keeps improving, keep learning. So learning, don't be complacent, be positive, and be flexible, adapt, and diversify your career path, and take the baby steps. Don't rush into it. Take your time and then reflect, especially at this time when you have the time to reflect.
Okay, Gary, that's a good words to finish, I think. But listen, I'd like to thank Orla and Gary and Gillian for taking the time to be with us here today on the Grad Ireland Career Discovery Week panel discussion. Really do appreciate it. Thank you all for being here with us today, and best of luck for the future. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Rory. Thanks.
All the best. Bye-bye.
Bye.